Hey, so let's do something a little different. I just had a debate and I want to take a little break. So let's talk about something a little bit more culturally relevant. Let's talk about woke and wokeism. So I have for a very long time been wanting to do a video on Batwoman, and I never got around to it. The show got canceled and it was kind of irrelevant. By the time that it got canceled, it had gone so far into the quote unquote woke that it had basically gone back around to being almost a parody of woke. But I got asked what woke is according to the conservative right, as if I somehow represent them. Let's talk about this. So when I first heard the word woke and I first started hearing the zeitgeist of it, I thought it was related to The Matrix. I was a huge fan of The Matrix. I was a huge fan of The 13th Floor and a very huge fan of Fight Club. So I thought mistakenly that woke was talking about waking up to the real reality, right? I remember at that time when woke started being used as an advertisement push. It was a good thing to be woke. It meant that it was a movie dealing with meta issues, or a book or a comic book dealing with meta issues. It wasn't a negative. Then um, it started being used in the political sphere, and this is back during the days of shitposting. Then at that point, it started to become a pejorative, right? Especially on the liberal side of YouTube, uh, liberal and progressives before the progressives that are now. This is just like the what do they call them? Classically liberal YouTubers would use woke as an insult. And I was like, fine, okay, I'm not going to use the term just because I don't like where they're using the term and I don't know if there's like some quote unquote dog whistling going on, right? Then Shoe on Head used it and with hilarious effect. And then Sitch and Adam were like, hey, we want to talk about it, but we want to make sure we're not being racist or doing a dog whistle. So I believe they read the original document that it was from. They read a book that it was mentioned in. They didn't read the whole thing. They just read like a few passages just to make sure the context was safe for them to use. And then, like all things like this, like when you fall down a rabbit hole and you want to learn a specific fact, it then fades into the background of your mind. You're like, okay, I know it's safe. I know it's not being used in an inappropriate way. I'm just going to use it when I need to. And if I don't ever use it, it doesn't matter. This is not part of my vocabulary, not part of my life. So, what is woke as far as the people who listen to Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson? What does woke actually mean? Well, it means waking up to the idea of a systemic system set up against certain behavioral norms that are seen as culturally abnormal. Anything that the conservative religious right is against. That kind of thing. And then they would throw in some, like, suppression of the working class, like, some kind of like um, anti-Marxian ideas would all be considered what woke would be fighting. So it's waking up to the fact that these are ideas that are layered on. So the history of the world is not the real history. There's always been this, the idea that in ancient Rome, homosexuality was greatly accepted in ancient culture. All these kind of things that, as someone who studies history, it's just not true. Now becomes true because it's like, no, all those things were written against these cultures, and these were white men suppressing the truth because they were conservative and they wanted to like hide all these real things that were going on. And now you're waking up to the real reality. So people are oppressed. People like me are somehow marginalized. That kind of stuff. But I think Goth X, who, if you watch her stuff, she's a really awesome YouTuber. She used to be on the liberal left. Now she's kind of in the conservative middle. Still, compared to like a traditional conservative, she's still very libertine in her ideas, but she's coming around to more and more conservative viewpoints. Still very much a radical. But her definition of woke, I think, is the best definition I've ever heard, which is that it's not woke per se. It's not things being woke that is a problem. There's nothing wrong with representation. There's nothing wrong with trying to reach a broader audience. The problem is corporate wokeism or tokenism. So it's when you take in a lesbian couple or a gay couple, or you take in a person of color, Hispanic, Black, Native American, but you don't fully develop them. You just have them in there to get that audience to come in. And then when the audience is there, that character is not developed, is not used. Since hearing Gothek's interpretation of woke and what the problem is corporate wokeism, I have come to see it as tokenization. It's when you have underdeveloped characters and you address the surface issue and you mention it, like you say, you have a character say in a very blunt way, women have to suffer the pay gap, or you say in a very blunt way without any irony, kind of like in the new version of the Proud Family, white fragility. Okay, there's a YouTube guy who I really love, who actually read through the entire book of White Fragility, and then another book as well by the same author. And he went through the entire thing. It was a great series. If I can, I'm going to link it down in the Lake Tentacles. I absolutely love him. He did a great job. And there's a lot of flaws with the idea of white fragility. And that's not addressed. It's mentioned and it's passed over like it's an accepted thing. That is corporate wokeism. That's where you tell the audience, hey, we have a gay character, or we have a marginalized character, or we have a disabled character. But the character just shows up on the screen, mentions whatever oppression they're dealing with, and then walks off the screen. No development, or if there is development, it's done in a negative light. Girlfriend in the refrigerator tropes, that kind of stuff. Anything you'd see on the old, I don't think it was called the Mary Sue website. It's whatever website Gail Simone used to write for, when she would write down against tropes, women against the tropes that women are subject to. Okay, let's move forward just a little bit. So that to me is a good example. And I'm going to contrast that with two different things. To me, there are great examples in media of shows that do include all the woke issues. They address all of them, but the show is not woke. It's just a really good show and has everything in there. So Arcane, League of Legends Arcane is perfect. Yes, it has the tough female that's somehow good from the beginning, and her development has to be character, not ability. Yes, you have the gay, lesbian, I'm not even sure if there's a transgender character in there, but there's room for a transgender character to develop in there. And you have all of these things. You have the underclass, you have the overclass, you have systemic racism, you have all these things being dealt with, classism, racism, speciesism. You have all of this stuff is in there, but it's not hitting you over the head. It's under the surface, and it's driving the motivations of the characters without the characters explicitly having to explain, hey, this issue is why I have to deal with this. And so the characters are allowed to relate to the audience. And by relating to the audience, you no longer care about how they identify, because now you're identifying with them, which helps you identify with people in real life. Get it? So the idea is that you want the straight white man to identify with the lesbian Black female character. You want the professional Black woman to identify with the poor white male character. You want the bisexual person in real life to identify with the straight heteronormative person in the show. Okay, so you want the people in real life, the bisexual person, the straight person, the Black person, the whatever person, the white person, to identify with the character in the show. So it doesn't matter what the character's race is. The real person can put themselves in that character's place and say, oh, I get it now. Oh, I'm being a jerk for not understanding the plight of this particular group because this person's just like me. That's good writing. Good writing hits you in the emotions and makes you think about things in a way that you haven't thought of before. It's not tokenism. And I think that's what wokeism or corporate wokeism has become. It's become tokenism. If a show was simply what I originally thought woke meant, which is simply waking you up to the reality of a situation, that's fine. Everybody loves a good revelation. What people don't like is being pandered to, or being insulted, or being villainized because of circumstances they can't control. Another great movie, an example that avoids the corporate wokeism, tokenism that happens, is Lost and Delirious. This is an amazing movie. This came out in 2001. When I saw it, me and a friend of mine were blown away. We were just amazed by this movie. Me and this friend, we identified with both characters, and we were horrified at the end result of the movie. And I don't want to spoil it for you, but if you haven't seen Lost and Delirious with Piper Perabo, if you haven't seen that movie, you got to go see it. And it avoids all the corporatism, all the tokenism, and it has a character that you can relate to. It doesn't matter if you're a straight black man or if you're a gay black man. It doesn't matter if you're a straight white woman or if you're a bisexual white woman. You're going to identify with these characters. And that's what makes the story work, is that it draws you in and makes you feel what they're feeling. You can relate to them. So then once they start dealing with the issues that are unique to that character and unique to their situation, you're already all in. You're already empathizing with the character. You're already compassionate for the character. That's great writing. I don't have to have lived in ancient Greece to feel for Odysseus. I don't have to be a Japanese samurai to feel what Marimoto Musashi feels. I just don't. I don't have to have been in the gulags or in Russia to identify with the character in Notes from the Underground. I don't have to be of any particular culture to identify with the books that I've read that have moved me and have changed me. I don't have to be a count in Transylvania to identify with Dracula. I just don't. I don't have to be a countess, some Eastern European country, to identify with Carmilla. Like it's ridiculous that you're trying to put this on audiences. You need to let people identify with the characters that they love. I read Japanese, Greek, Chinese, Native American literature. I don't have to be any of these cultures to identify with them. And I shouldn't have to. I shouldn't have to be Russian to identify with Tolstoy. I shouldn't have to be French to identify with Joan of Arc. I shouldn't have to be Hindu to identify with the great stories of Hinduism. You're adding a barrier to the literature that doesn't exist. You know, whether it's Batman, I've never been a billionaire. Whether it's The Witcher, I've never, or it's Ghostbusters. You know, like I don't have to be a scientist to like Ghostbusters. I don't have to be a HEMA practitioner to appreciate The Witcher. It's a weird barrier to put on people, and it shouldn't be there. When I'm talking about things that are badly done because they're woke, I'm going with that corporate wokeism, with that tokenism that Goth X is talking against. So A good example of doing it wrong, or the best example I can think of doing it wrong, is Batwoman, especially season 2. And if it had a season 3, I didn't get into it. It was very bad. I watched the first season, and I watched maybe the first 3 or 4 episodes of the second season, and I was done. And then I watched the finale. It was terrible. The new version of Charmed was terrible. The original version of Charmed was amazing, and it still dealt with a lot of the same kind of characters, but the writing was great. You could empathize with the characters. You cared what happened to Piper. You cared what happened to Phoebe. And in the new version, you didn't. 300 was great, and it dealt with everything. But you cared about the characters first. So it didn't matter if it was a guy or a girl, if they were straight or gay. And you wanted those two characters, the main femme fatale and the main hero protagonist, female character, to end up together. You didn't care about their sexuality. You cared about the characters. And when you put their sexuality first, then you no longer care about the character, because the character then becomes underdeveloped. And then it's just what it was in the 90s, which is where, it's going to be the lesbian kiss just so people watch. It's just an audience grabber. That's not good writing. Bros was crap. Velma was terrible. You watch something that was like mid. Something that wasn't great, wasn't bad. Something like, Captain Marvel. And then you watch something like Miss Marvel. Put that movie and that series right next to each other. Miss Marvel was amazing. It had true character development. It didn't matter that I'm not from that culture. It didn't matter that I'm not Muslim. I identified with Miss Marvel. Well, Captain Marvel was abrasive and pandering, and everything that was advertised around it didn't pay off in the actual movie. The character was not lesbian. The character was not queer. The character was not feminist. Yeah, it was advertised that way, but then when you got into it, it wasn't there. You watch something, and I love schlock, okay? So you watch Dark Matter. You watch something like Lost Girl, or you watch something like Continuum, okay? Those have all those characters in there. You even go back to something like the 2000s version of Battlestar Galactica. You have all that stuff there. Even Babylon 5, you can see all these themes, all these issues being dealt with, but it's never pandering. It's always interesting, and you're always developing as a human by watching it. You're not being affirmed in your beliefs, and you're also not being dissuaded in your beliefs. You're growing with the characters. You're experiencing something. You're not having the characters in exposition explain to you what they felt. You're growing with the character. This was something different. Don't expect this every week. I do want to self-promote. I do now have a Twitch channel. On YouTube, I have a channel here that's going to be dedicated more to gaming and comic books and entertainment. So if you want to hear conversations a little bit more like this, go check it out. It's Alpha Centurion 4. It's going to be, like I said, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Alpha Centurion 4. Check me out. If you're someone who follows my Twitter that's already an Alpha Centurion 4, I am going to have another one for my mutuals, but that's going to be just for my friends.